All right, welcome to another Red Alert podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chap. This is a season preview edition of the Red Alert podcast. I am joined by, the other partner of the program, Miss Cindy Berry.
On the phone, but ever present and ready to debate you on what this means for the Red Wings coming up here, Joe. We're coming off 3 losses. Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I don't really care about preseason that much, but when you put it in
I
perspective,
hate it when people say that, by the
yeah.
way.
Well, no, because you can't really take much out of preseason. What are you going to take out of preseason? Are you going to say, "Oh, this is an issue"? Like preseason, these guys are just trying not to get hurt. That's the point of the matter. Like they literally go out there and they're like, okay, I'm not trying to get hurt. I'm not trying to, lose games in the season. I just want to stay healthy. That's the name of the game. Stay healthy. Because
Well, and
you
I
could be like
get,
the LA Kings
yeah,
with Drew Doughty missing time. You could be like the Montreal Canadiens with Patrick Laine missing time. So I think it's very important that you stay healthy. That's the main goal of preseason. Stay healthy. I don't care what happens after that.
no, I understand that, and I get that that's everybody's argument. But you know what? We still got our hats handed to us. I don't think Austin Matthews about that when he played us. Think
Yeah.
kicked our ass. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like everybody's got the same perspective. It's not just like the Red Wings that are trying not to get hurt. Everybody's trying not to get hurt, and we still get beat. I mean, yeah, what was our record? 3-3-2 on preseason, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. But I think the only game out of preseason that I was disappointed with, because I'm not gonna be disappointed about much in preseason. Like it's just the way it goes. Like, okay, first of all, just that's my number one goal is stay healthy, like I said. But the second goal is don't repeat the same mistakes that you were repeating last year. And one of the things that you've seen from this Detroit Red Wings team in the Ottawa game, they blew a lead once again because they didn't tighten down in the third period. It went into overtime and they lost. And that can't transpire into the season. We're going to talk about that as well. But those are some of the things that I look at with preseason. But the rest of the stuff, no, it's fine. Like the record, I don't care about. The play, I don't care about. These guys are just, if you talk to any player at all, they'll say the same thing. I'm just trying not to get hurt. I'm trying just to go about my business. In reality, this is all about the young kids that are trying to earn roster spots. If you're a player that's going to be on the roster, you really don't care about preseason. That's the reality.
And the
And
thing is,
I
but the
think
thing is, I think there's a couple of guys that have to worry about a roster spot based on what we've seen in the preseason. And we're going to talk about that. One of the people we've got to talk about who is changing the whole lexicon here is Marco Casper. And I know he's on your list to talk about today.
yeah, you bring up a good because Marco Casper was he was a kind of a big piece in the Athletic. This is what the Athletic said. It was noticeable. He was noticeable in training camp. He was impactful to begin with the preseason, and he closed out his God preseason season with his best game yet Friday night. A 2-goal showing against Ottawa Senators, which they lost, in which Casper nearly recorded a hat trick in the first period. He's been excellent. Head coach Derek Lalonde said, "Energy, some finish there. He's had a really good camp." And my thing about it is, has he done enough to earn a spot on the roster?
Well, good question. I think everybody's asking that question because the Detroit Red Wings have some decisions to make. Derek Lalonde said recently that, in the next 24 hours, he and Steve are going to sit down. They're going to take a look at what the options are. And Steve even said, it was quoted in a recent interview saying that he wanted to be in this position where he was going to have to have some very difficult choices to make coming up into finalizing his roster, and it's due tomorrow at 5 o'clock. On Monday at 5 o'clock, they have to turn
Yep.
rosters in. So they're talking today, just like we're talking. I don't think they're listening to us, but I'll tell you, here's what I think should happen. Here's what I think is going to happen when it comes to Marco Casper. I think the arguments are there that he has made himself a roster spot. Do I think he's going to get it? No. If it were me, and of course it's not, I'm no Steve Eiserman by any stretch, right? I don't have that kind of panache, and I sure as heck don't have his experience and position. I don't have his money either, though. I would trade it all for that. No, but it's not Steve's style to take a player like Casper, who's so young. That's the one thing I have to give him credit for. If it were me, I'd be like, hell with it, man. Put this kid on the roster. I want to take whatever he's got and I want it now. And Steve's not going to do that. He's never shown a propensity to do that ever. He is going to take Marco Casper, I believe, and he's going to look out for that player's best interest. And his best interest is probably to be in Grand Rapids where he can earn serious ice time on a top line as opposed to being somewhere in depth, getting less than optimal minutes in the NHL where he could, in fact, encounter some significant issues, injuries, and other things. So I think it's likely Steve is going to put him in Grand Rapids, even though I think he's earned a spot on the roster.
Yeah, I think that the way you got to look at it is, I think uh, Austin Watson has done enough to earn a spot on the Red Wings roster too. He was a professional tryout, but the more and more I look at this Red Wings team, no matter how I feel about some of the young players, and these are some of the young players that are trying to make the roster. That they could make the roster: Marco Casper, Carter Mazer, Nate Danielson, which I think he's going to Grand Rapids. That's a certainty, and Albert Johansson. And I look at two names on that list in particular: Albert Johansson and Marco Casper. Those are guys I think that could potentially make the roster. And I got my little roster projections, and I wanted to see what you were gonna say. But yeah, they have a big decision on their hands with Marco Casper because obviously, if you bring him up, he's not going to be playing second line minutes because second or first line, like he's going to be playing third, fourth line minutes. I think he'll play third line. And then it also depends on who you pair him up with. The young kid has to have someone that can help him out a little bit. Maybe on the offensive end, maybe on the defensive end. But I look at some of this bottom four and I'm kind of weary about who to put on his line that will help him out in terms of offense, in terms of the defense. Like I think we got a couple defensive forwards in that bottom four, bottom six, but I don't know if the offense is good in that bottom six. That's what I worry about, to be
Well,
honest.
and the thing is too that Casper is a natural center, so I think maybe it makes more sense to keep him in Grand Rapids and give him an opportunity to maybe start working on as a winger a little bit, so that he'll be a little bit more versatile. Because when you look at who potentially could make this roster, there's a strong feeling that Jonathan Berggren is going to be put on the fourth line with Joe Veleno and Tyler Mott, and I think I'll be honest. I think Casper's done more to earn a roster spot than Berggren. I think Casper would outperform Berggren, to be honest with you. But they're going to give it to Berggren because he's older. He's put in his time, I think. And they're going to feel a little more confident bringing Berggren into this environment than they will Casper. And I think, to be honest, I think they see a little bit more long term potential in Casper and they want to develop him right. Not that they don't want to develop the other ones right, but I think he's kind of one of those ones they really don't want to take any chances with. But to be honest, I think he's better than Bergeron. I think he outperformed him in the preseason. I think he outperformed him at camp. I think he's going to outperform him if he's in the roster. So um, I don't think he's going to end up there. In fact, I've got some concerns about Bergeron even being there. I like Johnny Burgers. I do. I'm just not so sure that he's necessarily ready to rock and roll. I'm feeling more comfortable with Edmondson now. I think it's an almost virtual certainty that he's going to be there. Also, he's a defenseman, so they got a little more need for him than they do yet another forward when
You're
they've got
breaking up a little
all
bit,
these
just so you
other
know.
pickups that they had in free agency. Oh,
You were
sorry, I'm
breaking up a
breaking
little
up a little
bit. Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. What
Oh,
were you
yikes.
saying?
Sorry about that. So what I was saying is that I'm not sure that Johnny Burgers is going to perform as well as expected. I think that Casper would perform better than he would. I think Edvinsson is ready. I think that's almost a virtual certainty he's going to be in the roster on the roster, but he's a defenseman and we have more need for that than we do for yet another forward is what I was saying. So, um that goes into the whole thing of though if they want to move Casper onto the roster, they're going to have to make some room for him. So who goes, right? Not only
Mm-hmm.
who goes in the forward group, but they got to make some cap space too. I don't know if carrying 3 goalies is an answer. Maybe there's some room to move there to find some cap space. Maybe putting somebody on waivers. I know people talked about Justin Hall being put on waivers, perhaps.
Yep.
There could be some room made there. So, in addition to finding a position for Casper, even if he takes Johnny Berger's spot and he takes Bergen's spot, and they put him out there in the NHL as a winger, which again, guy's a natural forward, not or natural center, not a winger. So I think you're taking a chance there. I'm just not so sure that there's a roster spot that really fits him. But it's too bad because I think he's better than some of the other guys we expect will be on the roster.
It's interesting. Derek Lalonde said to MLive, he said a lot of moving parts and some tough decisions. Coach Derek Lalonde said Saturday morning. I mentioned going into camp. I hope we sit here after 8 preseason games. It was some very hard decisions, and our young guys have done that to us. So something we'll have to work. We'll have to work through the next couple of days. And then he says, if this is from Answer Khan, he says if there's any surprises, it'll likely be forward where forward young. Oh God, this is a big mistypo from MLive. Marco Casper and Carter Mazer, and veteran Austin Watson, who is on a pro tryout. Casper, the 8th overall pick in 2022, had an outstanding camp preseason, but the Red Wings would need to waive or move a player to make room for him make room for the center. We've been very open-minded throughout camp with a lot of moving parts, and this is a good problem, Lalonde says. We have had some young players step up in camp, and this is going to be a very interesting 48 hours. So it seems like from that perspective, like it seems like they don't know which way they're going to go, basically.
And I think that's true. I think they still have to have a conversation about it. I think there's so many things that have to be weighed out. Now, let me give you my opinion on Watson, okay? Watson made it very clear that he didn't want a two-way contract. He wants a one-way contract. So
Right.
he's really not interested in being sent down to Grand Rapids. I'm not so sure if I understand it from where he's at professionally, but I'm not sure that that's quite the attitude that is going to be helpful to us. I'm okay letting him go. I get it. He's a physical presence. I get that. But I'm not going to be brokenhearted if he doesn't end up on the roster or they put him on waivers or something like that, or they just don't sign him rather. I'm okay with that. I would rather see them do something with Casper. I just think they just don't know what to do with him. I mean, I know what they probably like to do, but I just don't think Steve's going to do it. I really don't. I'll be surprised if he ends up on the roster. I'll say he absolutely earned a spot, but I'll tell you, I'll be surprised about it. Now, and I'm saying all of this, okay, not having had an opportunity to talk with my contacts yet, right? So, and I was thinking about this the other day, Joe, and I want to point this out. We when we put out our rumors segments, or we tell people, hey, look for this, hey, look for that, and we sometimes get some crap for that, right? Like, oh, how do you find that out? Well, what's your credible news source? Well, honey, let me tell you, I'm it. Okay, we're it. Chances if we're going to tell you something, it's because we heard it from a credible source inside the organization or very close to the organization. I just want to point out 3 of them real quick. So we come back and we start talking about some of these guys and where they might end up or what the plans are, it's on good authority. Okay, so number 1, we called, and this is going back, we called the Anthony Mantha trade before it happened, the move. We called that before anybody knew about it. Number 2, we called Alex DeBrincat coming here. We knew Alex DeBrincat was being signed in Detroit at least a week before anybody else did, and it took a week for the news to break, or a few days or something like that. Number 3, I told you for over a year that the Detroit Red Wings were looking at Patrick Kane. They were trying to acquire Patrick Kane. And who's here on the roster in Detroit today, if not Kaner himself? So there you go. 3 instances right there. Just had to clear the air about it. So when we bring something forward, it's on good authority. Just had to say it, Joe.
Oh yeah.
It had to be said.
We our record speaks for itself, but
That's right.
it's something that I don't like. Here's the thing, like this whole roster decision. This is a huge roster decision for the Detroit Red Wings, and whatever they do with the roster decision, is gonna be magnified. Like, if they let's say they do make a trade and they keep Casper on the roster, and let's say they trade a Berggren to someone, and he blows up, like, he does great, like, that's gonna be a mark, you know what I'm saying? There's so many ways that this can go. I mean, Austin Watson's another one. You brought up Austin Watson about the professional tryout. I don't think you're gonna get a guy who has played as much in the NHL as he has to say, "Oh, yeah, I'll go to Grand Rapids." Like, it just won't happen. Like, the reality of the situation is he can be on a roster where you're a playoff roster. He's done that before.
Oh,
So
I think he'll go there, Joe, but he's not going to go there on a two-way contract.
right.
He'll play in Grand Rapids. You just got to show him the money. He just has to be making NHL salary
No,
to
I
do
I
it.
don't I
That's
don't
all.
well, then you gotta get into the whole contract nuances and that all that. It's very unlikely. It's either he goes to Detroit or he doesn't go to Detroit. He doesn't go to Grand Rapids. He won't go to neither. So, unless they say, "Can you do a two-way contract and you'll be like our Austin Zarnik or we'll bring you up?" Honestly, I think that Watson has a little bit of he has some mystique to him to where it would be cool if he made the roster, especially the way Johnny Burgers plays sometimes. I'm a little bit disappointed in the way he was playing in the preseason, to be honest. I'm not even gonna lie. I thought his defense was very lackluster, and I don't think you need that. And honestly, it's kind of disappointing from my sense because I thought Bergen would be a way better uh, total player over the course, and he's got some talent. So the fact of the matter is that he hasn't really put it all together. He hasn't really done, hasn't really came together on the defensive side. Really, kind of pisses me off, to be honest. And I can't imagine that Steve Eiserman's going to sit here and go, "Oh yeah, it's Johnny Burgers. Like we're going to put him on the roster." I think the toughest decision they have is saying, does Jonathan Berggren make the roster, or do you put a guy up like Marco Casper who's more responsible than a guy like Johnny Burgers? And I don't care about what you did for the organization or you paid your dues. The reality of the situation is you don't do your job. That's the main point.
Well, that's it, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know who I don't know who Steve is gonna put in that spot. I if he puts Casper there, okay, it would be out of character for him. Okay. But I'm not, again, I haven't had the opportunity to get the information that I really need from the people I trust to be able to come out and say, yeah, that's going to happen. I'm just going based on past performance, past practice of what Steve has typically done and kind of what his mindset is. Uh, we'll have to see, but I think what we can say for sure, I think we're going to see. I don't think those top two lines are changing. I think it's going to be DeBrincat, Larkin, Kane, Raymond, Comfort, and Tarasenko. I don't think that top six is moving at all. I think that's exactly what you're going to see. I can't imagine his third line changing much either, unless for some reason, um, he and I'm just thinking out way outside the box here, but if he did something like dropped out Valeno and put in Casper, dropped Cop down and put Casper up with Rasmussen and Fisher because it would make more sense. Um, I don't know. I'm not sure if they do something creative in that bottom six or not to fit Marco Casper in there, but I agree with you. Bergeron, I don't think showed what he needs to show. Now, the fact is, if they have all these guys down in Grand Rapids, they know they can pull them up at any time, and chances are there's going to be injuries, and those guys are going to see NHL ice time. So they have opportunities to redeem themselves and maybe stay on the roster or whatever, depending on what kind of injuries we face during the season. But here's what I'm worried about, Joe. Let me tell you my concern about not putting Casper on the roster now. They go through the first half of the season, and usually it's a half and half. If they start off well, then we know that they struggle in that 1 month, right? Right around Christmas, January, something like that. They start struggling, right? And they do it every damn year. And so you've got that, and then now you make this great burst after that in the second half of the season, and now you start bringing up guys who haven't had a whole lot of experience on NHL ice at a time when you're running for the playoffs. See, that's what I think the problem is. So they're like always behind the eight ball, it seems, when they do it that way. Put these guys up early, get them on the roster. If you got to drop them back down to Grand Rapids and bring somebody else up, so be it. But get them some NHL experience early. I mean, I get that because, like you said, the preseason doesn't count. So get them some experience early on here in the first half of the season. Just a thought.
Well, this brings up the interesting point of what is the no, this is not the one. God, oh man, oh right here. They're all mixed up right now, but the layouts or whatever. But this brings up a good point. Are they going to make the playoffs or are they not going to make the playoffs? Like that's what I see. You brought up a good point. Just a couple minutes, like a minute ago, you brought up this point of when they get to December, when they get to November, they kind of struggle. They kind of go back to the pack. They kind of lose their luster. And if you look over the last 2 years with the November and December win loss record and how many points they actually gain out of those 2 months, it's not good. So last year they started out very, very hot to start out in October. Very, very
Yeah.
hot. They
Yep.
started out hot as hell and they looked great. They got to November, I think it was the second week of November, they kind of started to hit the skids. Then they had some injuries, which you can't help injuries, but at the same time, I mean, someone's got to keep it together. Like it's this, it can't be like this 2 straight years. And then, so that brings up the good point of this year, that can't happen. I don't care what what the excuse is. That can't happen. Once, okay, it's an anomaly, right? Twice, all right, something's going on. 3 times, I'm an idiot if I keep believing that something's wrong. Because I mean, the reality
Well,
of the situation is like, fool me once, shame on fool me once, all right. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, so it's definitely a shame on me.
yeah, then you're an idiot. Let me
Yeah.
but no, okay, exactly what you said there, exactly right. Now let me ask you something. What has the common denominator been the last 2 seasons and still the common denominator now?
Derek Malone.
Coaching. That's right. That's right. I think there is, and you were pretty strong about it. I think a couple of episodes ago or whatever. And I have to say this: you can't say he can't say he doesn't have the talent anymore. He can't say he doesn't have the experience. Experienced guys. He can't say that he doesn't have support of management in terms of spending money. They're willing to spend the money.
Yep.
You can't say that anymore. You really don't have any excuses other than the fact that maybe your system doesn't work or it doesn't work with the pieces you've got. So you're going to have to adjust. Scotty Bowman had to do it. Who's the other one? The other head coach that is escaping me, Mike Babcock. Babs
Yep.
had to do it. They both had to adjust the way that they had to adjust their systems to accommodate the players that they had in order to have success. And those are arguably two of the more winninger coaches. I mean, well, Scotty's obviously like one of the winningest coaches in all of hockey, and Babs has got some cups under his belt too. So when you got guys like that who have to adjust their system, I think Lalonde has to face the reality that he might have to do that. And if he's not willing to do that or he's unable to do that, you're going to get the same result you had the last 2 years.
Yeah, I just what really baffles me, to be honest, is when you look at the Red Wings, right? October, February, March, they looked like a good team. At the end of March, they started hitting the skids. Well, the beginning of March, and then they went all the way into April, and that's where they lost their kind of playoff run. Because if they would have done good in March, they would have done good. But the fact of the matter is, this ever since Lalonde has taken over, no matter what year, there's been 2 months of the whole season that they lay an egg. And it can happen 1 month because that usually happens, like where you just go through a period where you're kind of injuries are happening, bounces are not happening your way, or whatever the case may be. But 2 months is something that's different. Like you can't have 2 bad months in the NHL. The way this league is set up, it's kind of like 2 bad months is going to get you in a lot of hurt. you're going to be in a lot of trouble, especially in this division that you play in, the Atlantic Division, because like you got the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are going to be a good team. You got the Boston Bruins, who are going to be a good team. The Tampa Bay Lightning. We got to factor in obviously the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. Like there's so many teams, and then you got the Buffalo Sabres, the Ottawa Senators, Montreal Canadiens have some talent. It's so this division is so tough. You can't take games off. Like you can't say, oh, we're injured. We'll blame it on that. Like it's so hard to make those games up. They seen it at the end of last season. Like you thought you were gonna make it up last season, like going into the final 3 week, final 4 games, and you lost 2 of them. So that's kind of what you get yourself into when you play that lackadaisical game, if we're gonna say it like that.
Well, I'd be really interested to hear and of course, they're not going to tell us, okay? But wouldn't you just love to know what Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko and wouldn't you love to know what they think of Newsy Lalonde? I mean, and I don't mean as a person, I mean strictly as a coach, because they've been coached by some of the best. And what would
Quinville,
I'd love to
Berube.
know what they think. Yeah. And here's the other thing I'd like to know. I'm kind of curious. What is it with this Red Wings management where they can't go and get another head coach from somewhere else and bring them here? Why do we always get the assistant coaches who've been given a chance to be a head coach? Get us just an actual someone with head coaching experience who's got success as a head coach. Blashill didn't. Lalone doesn't. Lalonde's got a cup, but is an assistant coach. And I'll tell you right now, because I've been in both positions in my field and maybe in your field, Joe, right? There's a difference when you're the head guy and you're the leader and when you're just a supporting cast member. Not that they're not all important, right? Like let's just look at the Detroit Lions. Okay? Now, nobody's going to argue that Dan Campbell doesn't have an amazing supporting cast, right? He's probably got the best offensive coordinator in the league, arguably, and his defensive coordinator is right up there too, right? He's got some of the top two coordinators in the league, but he's the one who makes the difference.
Yep.
He's the one. Okay, it's Dan Campbell. It's the way, it's his style. It's the fact that those players respect him. They play for each other as well for him. And I'll tell you, that's the other thing. When we talk about making the playoffs and likelihood of making the playoffs, you've got to get a group of guys who respect the hell out of their coach, not just like him, like hey, he's a great guy, but respect him for his capabilities, number one. And two, you got to have a group of guys that are willing to play for each other. You see the same thing with the Detroit Tigers. AJ Hinch. AJ Hinch has earned their respect, and those guys play for each other. They've said it. Detroit Lions, same thing. They all say it. Does this Red Wings team, number one, do they respect their head coach? And are they playing for each other? That I think is going to have as much to do with if they make the playoffs as the actual technical skill and ability.
So in the comments, Facebook comments, Ryan Holton comments, and he goes, "The defense accountability hasn't been there, and that's on the coaches. He sits younger players for less, with some of the vets get a longer leash for guys like Petrie and Sherratt." And you know what? That's a great point by Ryan, because that is exactly the issue. I think it is the issue. Like if you're going to treat everybody equal, the veterans got to be treated like that too. Like I can go back to a time, because I follow the Lions just like I do the Red Wings. I have a podcast on them, so I follow them closely. I remember a time early in Dan Campbell's tenure, there was a guy named Michael Brockers, and Michael Brockers he's a veteran in the room. He was a great player, and there was Trey Flowers that was there too, and he kept him there, and he said, "Look, I'm not going to be playing you, but I need you to help the room. That's what I need you to help. Like your play isn't good enough to put you out there, so I'm not going to put you out there." That sends a message to the entire team that no matter how you play, no matter who you are, if you don't play, you're going to get sat down. I think that's a great message to send. And if you look at what Mike Babcock would do, I was going to say Michael Babcock because I was going to talk to him like he's my kid. Or Scotty Bowman, like they would do the same thing. Like if these players that you have aren't really performing to their duty. Don't you kind of think about it and go, all right, like this is a big issue.
You know what I think they're lacking? Uh, and I love Steve. You know, I love Stevie. I do, and I like Derek Lalonde as a person. But the reason they like each other so much is they're two of the same person. Neither one is aggressive. Neither one. They don't have that aggressive edge like a Dan Campbell or an AJ. They don't. They just aren't. They are far more conservative. They take a very metered conservative approach. And man, I think you got to light a fire under these guys and you've got to be aggressive. You got to, that's why, again, if it were me, I'd put Marco Casper on that roster. Let's get aggressive. Let's start doing some things that people don't expect instead of taking the safe route all the time because the safe route isn't necessarily the winning route.
Well, I mean, you can look at the Tigers when they traded Jack Flaherty for Trey Sweeney. I mean, that was a kind of a necessary move, but it was also a move that helped them in the long run. And I think what AJ Hinch said on the on the radio with how him and Scott Harris always talk and they disagree a lot. He said they disagree a lot, but it's healthy conversation because you get to know each other and you get to kind of figure out each other. You kind of might be hitting on something, Cindy. They might be too much of each other to kind of have different opinions and therefore they think the same way. And I don't think that's healthy. I mean, you've been around some winning teams in politics and everything. You know, I don't think it's healthy to have a team or, you know, people around you that don't tell you no or don't tell you you're wrong or don't tell you, look, this is the way I think about it. What do you think about it this way? That's the way I feel about it because, like, for instance, I'll give you a personal example in my own personal life. So obviously, I got the social medias, whatever. So this week, I'm gonna be looking for social media and marketing agents to help me out. You know what I'm saying? So I can, you know, get some things that I want to get done. But for the reality of the situation is like the only reason I'm saying that is because I know that I can't do what those people do. So I'm gonna go out and seek those people. But if you have the people that are in your corner that are like, "Oh yeah, you're great. You're doing a great job," and you're not doing a great job, those people really don't help me out. And I think that's kind of what you hit on with Derek Lalonde and Steve Eisman. Like, I don't think they really have this healthy conversation, healthy disagreements that will really propel them into the future, like as a good team. Because I look at Lavone and he's such a nice guy. I love to have a beer with him. He seems like a great guy, but at the same time, like I don't see him getting pissed off much. Like I don't see him, you know, sending a message to some of the veterans.
Oh
Ryan
no,
said
what
Ryan said it
you
Ryan said it perfectly in the comments. Like, where's the accountability? Like the accountability should be everyone, not just rookie players, not just young players, everybody. That's the way it works.
and they don't roll that way though. I mean, I'm just telling you the way these guys are. Derek Lalonde's super sweet guy. But I'll tell you how it is in that organization. Everybody does what Stevie Y says. I mean, it's really, and I love the guy, but it's fallen a little bit on him now because there's too much what it's called in the corporate world. It's called groupthink. You got too much groupthink going on.
And
Everybody's
that's the
thinking the
problem.
same way, and you're getting stagnation. That's
Yep.
what happens when you get groupthink. And if
Yep.
you don't think that the Red Wings have been stagnating, yeah, they're making progress. They're making progress, but it's it's happening so slowly that to the point you can get inertia, you get stagnation. And I think there needs to be somebody to shake this thing up. I don't know who it's going to be, but they got to get someone in there who's got a fresh perspective and can shake this thing up. And they've got to be bold. They got to be bold, and they're not being bold. Like Ryan said from the comments, right? So, like you're saying, he said, you're letting these veterans kind of get away with certain things and they may not be getting their feet held to the fire as much as these young guys because of where the focus is at. I think that's what it is. I think it's a matter of that's just where the Red Wings focus is at. Steve's focus has always been on the up and coming, the young core, the what he sees as to be the future of the Red Wings. The veterans, he doesn't see that way. So long as they're performing their function in his mind, which is to mentor his young up and coming Stanley Cup championship team in waiting, um, They don't really go to performance that much because that's not the metrics he's necessarily looking at.
So
I don't know how else to explain it, but that's how he thinks.
as we're talking on the podcast, there has been someone put on waivers that is a veteran for the Detroit Red Wings.
And which one of them was it?
Any
Hall?
guess? Any guess? Justin Hall. That's the guy who's
Yep.
been put on waivers. So
Yep.
it's good to see that because honestly, like I watched a little bit of Justin Hall and look, he seems like a great guy, but the reality of the situation is like I'd rather see Johansson up here. I'd rather see, obviously Johansson would be one of those guys. I think Johansson's going to be a really good defenseman, but yeah, that's a breaking news. Elliot Friedman tweeted it out just a couple minutes ago that Justin Hall has been put on waivers. So it's
And
going to be it's going to be
I'll tell
interesting
you,
to see what happens in the next like 24 hours.
right? Because I'll tell you what, and I'm going to tell you right now, that right there is your signal. Here's what it says to me. The fact that they put Justin Hall on waivers means they're making some cap space. What that says to me is they are seriously considering putting Marco Casper on the roster. Maybe it's going to happen, Joe. I was advocating for it. I didn't think Steve would do it, but maybe he is willing to step out now. Maybe he is willing to do something bold. Maybe he is willing to take a chance and maybe do something he wouldn't normally do. Wouldn't it be something to see Marco Casper maybe he can put Bergeron on there with him. I don't think so, but I am willing to bet you the reason he put him on waivers, they're trying to find a spot for Marco Casper in the cap space for him.
Well, I think the defenseman spot's more for Johansson.
Well, it's going to be Edvinsson or whatever.
Well, though Edvinsson's up already, so it don't matter. I penciled him into the lineup, but Johansson's the guy I think that's going to be the guy that's going to be in the roster, because I think Justin Hall and Johansson, that was kind of like a toss-up. Like, who do you go with? And I think you always go with a younger player, especially when Johansson's done everything he can do at Grand Rapids. Like, if you watch Grand Rapids the last couple years, he's done everything he can do. So I'm more kind of I'm trying to figure out how they're gonna measure this down. Like this is my roster that I put together a little bit. Tell me what you think about it. So this is the forwards. Obviously, you got the Brinkett, Larkin, Raymond on the first line. Second line is Tarasenko, Comfort, and Kane. On this third line, I had to kind of mix it up because I do think Rasmussen can be useful on offense. So I put him next to Casper and Veleno. So that seems like a pretty decent line. And then Tyler Mott, Andrew Kopp, and Jonathan Berggren round out the fourth line. Any things there that you stands out to you?
I don't know if they're going to keep Lucas Raymond on that top line. I think they might move Patrick Kane up there.
Well, however you put it, like if I think Kane and Tarasenko would have a really good dynamic. I also think that like if you put Comfort, Kane, and Tarasenko on one line, I think that really puts a good it's a good second line. It's a great second line, especially the way that Comfort plays a two-way game. But because they're gonna need a two-way guy on Kane and Tarasenko's line, like that's just the reality. So however you mix up the wings, you can do that. But I think if you mix up Kane and Raymond, I have no issue with that right there. So
yeah, the only question I've got is, I just think they're going to find. I really hope I really wanted to find a spot for Casper. I really do. Even if it would mean dropping Joe Veleno, I would do that. I would take Casper over Veleno. I would take Casper over Berggren. I just think what I saw from Marco Casper, he's got the capacity to be a Connor Bedard, and I was worried about Connor Bedard. I thought they brought him up too early, but he actually is weathering the. I mean, he's doing pretty darn well. He is. I'm very impressed. But I think Casper could do that. I think he could handle it like Bedard does. So I think find a spot for Casper in the bottom six. That's just me. What do you got on defenseman?
So defenseman, I got Sherratt and Seider. Now, if you want to put Edvinsson up there, I could do that. But what I like about Edvinsson and the Petrie line, that's a second defenseman pairing. I do like Petrie and Edvinsson because Edmondson's kind of like that, do it all. Petrie's he's a decent defenseman. He's just not a puck mover. So if I put a puck mover on that line, on that defensive pairing, I'm okay with it. And then your third line is actually a pretty decent defensive pairing. It's Mata and Gustafsson. I think that's a pretty damn good defensive pairing. Now, if you wanted to put Gustafsson up there with Petrie, with Evanson, you could do that, or Mata with Edmondson. Doesn't matter how you do it, but I think that a good puck mover with Petrie and Sherratt is necessary. So if you're gonna put Sider and Evanson up, so you gotta figure out who's gonna be the puck mover on those second and third pairing. And I think that Mata does a good job doing a puck moving. And I think Gustafsson obviously could do a good job moving the puck as well. So I look at Gustafsson as kind of in Mata to play a good easy pair, because we always talk about Olli Mata, Cindy, and we always talk about him how he's a great stay-at-home defenseman. He does a great job in his own zone. And Gustafsson, he's a better defensive player than Shane Gottsberg, and he's nearly a good offensive player like Gottsberg is. So I like that line as well, because we know Mata's not going to really give you much offensively.
Well, so when I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time up at training camp when Simon Edvinsson and Olli Mata had just been brought in, and they had those two playing together a lot, but um, at least they did a couple of training camps ago. But Petrie, the thing I like about Petrie, and the same thing I like about Ben Sherratt, they're consistent. Those guys are consistent. Are they knocking it out of the park? No, but they don't need to, because they provide that stability that the Wings lack in so many areas. They need that stability, just like Dylan Larkin. He's an anchor. Petrie and Sherratt, that you know what you're going to get, and they're going to turn in a pretty regular performance, right? I
Yep.
like the way you got it set up. I like Sherratt with Sider, and I like Edmondson with Petrie. I think I wouldn't change that. Mata Gustafsson, I like that. I think that's good. Now, what do you got on your fourth pair? Because
Oh,
uh
the goal. Well, that's the the lineup, obviously. But then if you want to go to
yeah,
the goal, you wanted to go to the goalies. It's very simple. Lyon and Talbot are going to be the projected goal starter and backup. And then if you want to go to the depth, who are you going to keep on the roster? That's going to be on the roster. It's going to be
right.
Johansson, Christian Fischer, and Billy Huso. I do think Billy Huso makes the roster. I'm not really gonna
Yeah,
sit here. I'm not really gonna sit here and say that he's not gonna make the roster, because I find it hard to believe that they're just gonna, send him to Grand Rapids, because there's just gonna be no cap relief for really, to be honest. And I don't think anybody's gonna trade for him. So you're kind of stuck with them. That's my opinion. It because and if he's in the backup, if he's in a depth role, it gives him a little bit more shot to stay healthy. My opinion.
so I think Kuso's going to make the roster also. I
Mm.
think they're in a spot where they almost have to keep Talbot and Lyon on there because we don't have any standout goaltenders. And since they seem to like this rotational, three goaltenders, they've gotten into this pattern. I don't see them changing it until they do get one of those really outstanding netminders, and we probably won't see that. I don't think for the next couple of years until you get Kosa developed or something like that. These none of these guys are going to be more than what you see that they are. Let me put it that way. I don't see any of those goaltenders being more than you see that they have been. So they're going to have to keep three of them on the roster. Um, and it's possible that they could be gonna carry Casper and Johansson. You know what I mean? I don't know who those last two spots are gonna go to, but here's my concern: you're still a little weak on defense. You got all these great forwards, you got depth there, but I think you almost have to carry two more defensemen, don't you think?
Well, I mean, if you got so the way it shakes out is you got 7 defensemen. So that bears out. You usually don't keep 8, 9. So if you keep 8, that's a little bit much. I mean, you could look across NHL. I think there's teams keeping 8, but the issue here is you got to keep a goalie on the roster, an extra goalie on the roster. This is the issue.
Right. That's
If
the
you
problem they've
if
got.
if you had an extra spot, you keep like a defenseman. Okay, like would Justin Hall be a good depth defenseman with a 2 goalie system? Yes, I think he would. As a depth piece, right? Like a eighth defenseman where you could kind of rotate him in on certain days, you know what I'm saying? But the issue you have is you got 3 goalies on the roster right now. And when you talk about having 3 goalies on the roster, well, someone's gonna have to go out. Like there's only so many players that you could put on a roster. So you're kind of stuck. So I think think it's 20. I think it's 23 players that are on the NHL
Yep.
rosters.
23.
So,
Yep.
so if you have 23, that leaves 20 right there. And then if you got your starting lineup, I mean, just take 7 away from 20. That gives you 13 forwards. So it's like you're kind of like playing with like fire with right there, because you don't want to get rid of a guy like Austin Watson. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't really want to get rid of him because he has some, he can give you something, but you got to keep 3 goalies, and that is the issue. And when they signed Jack Campbell, I was like, all right, well, Jack Campbell's in the player assistance program now, so that's not gonna work. Because you know,
Well,
he was
see,
gonna be down in Grand Rapids anyways, but you know, you could have traded Husso or one of the goalies away and potentially got some capital. But the issue here is Jack Campbell's gone. So now it's gonna be, you know, Gylander and Kosa in the AHL. And then if you do have goalie issues, let's say you do lose 2 goalies, do you bring Kosa up? I think you have to. I think Kosa is going to be up this year. That's my opinion. I think you're going to learn real quick that, you know, Alex Lyon and Talbot can do it. They can do it to a certain extent. But you're going to run into a part of the season where you're going to run into an injury or 2. And it's going to be like, who do you bring up? Do you bring up Kosa? I think Kosa is more than ready to come up here. Will he be good off the hop? That's something to be undetermined. But I think that the way that the Coast has been playing in Grand Rapids, I think that's a easy way to kind of like give this thing a little life, because what this team is really lacking right now, Cindy, and this is one of the questions I have on here is goalie a big worry? Because I think it totally is.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
we're talking about it, just we're going through it right now, and we're just talking about it like back and forth, and it's kind of like you got to keep 3 goalies on the roster. So which one of them is going to be your number 1? Like I put Lyon there, but it could be Talbot. It could be Talbot. But when you run into injuries, because Talbot's not a spring chicken, you know, Billy Husso has not been able to stay healthy. Like you're running into this issue right here. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the issue that you have, and it's a discredit right there to. I know it's hard for you to get goalies in the NHL because a lot of teams are looking for goalies, but honestly, if I'm Steve Eisman, I'm gonna pick up the phone. I'm gonna call Boston and ask them what they want for Jeremy Swayman. That's what I would do.
Right. Right. No, matter of fact, it's so funny you said that because I was going to say the exact same thing. You already know there's discord there. You already know you got an opportunity there. And I hope that he has. And again, I wish I'd had the opportunity to talk to some folks so I could have given some insight here, because I really don't have any other than what I'm reading, the same stuff that you guys are reading. Right. And so I think there's an opportunity there. I think that would solve a ton of problems. He could take 2 goalies off the roster. If he could get Swayman, they would replace 2 of them. And then again, but then here it goes. We got again here, Joe, is you got a problem with cap space now because Swayman isn't going to come cheap. That's the problem he's having in Boston. So
Yeah.
do you have the money to get him? You'd have to let you'd have to let Husso go.
Yeah.
Husso's your biggest money guy on there.
Yep.
You'd have to let Husso and probably I'm thinking Lyon would
Yep.
probably be the 2 that go. They'd keep Cam Talbot and Swayman, and then we would have an actual playoff contender. Because even if we claw our way into the postseason, you still have that goaltender problem. And I don't think you've got I just don't believe that we have a Stanley Cup or playoff really quality level goalie. And so you're gonna find that to be an ongoing problem unless somebody gets hot and has this some kind of Cinderella season at the during the playoffs, if we can scratch our way into them. So I think you do that. You bring Casper up. If you're taking Hall out of there, you can get Casper on the roster. I think I would have a lot more hope for the playoff hopes for the Red Wings if they made those 2 moves.
So aside from Justin Hall, this is from Elliot Friedman again. Players that have been waived has been Dries, Hall, Legason, Rafferty, Steve Lee.
Yeah.
There's no really surprises right there as of yet. So it'll be interesting what happens going forward. But like you said, goalie is an issue for me as well. Um, I just don't. You nailed it about the cap space. Like that is gonna have to happen. But the way I look at it is like you usually don't get these opportunities that much. You know what I'm saying? And I think that the way you can kind of, if you're Eiserman, you can coax yourself into making this decision. I believe you got two elite goaltenders in this system. That's my opinion. Like I believe Trey Augustine, I believe and Sebastian Costa could be elite goaltenders in the NHL. And you look at what Augustine has done on the college level, the Olympic level with the gold medal that the USA won. I have a lot of hope with Trey Augustine as well. So I look at it as like, if you can get rid of one, who would you get rid of? Now I like Costa's size, but I'll get rid of Costa because I think that's who Boston would really, really want. And you'd have to give him obviously a goaltender, and I think that'd be Alex Lyon or maybe it'd be Cam Talbot or something like that. But you have to give him a roster player too, and at that point, that's where it gets murky. But if you're Yzerman, goalie's been your biggest issue. It has, even though the team defense hasn't been good, the goaltender situation has not been good at all. So that's something I would definitely look into if I was Steve Yzerman, because you really can't get away from, bad goaltending for so long. Steve
Well,
Yzerman
I'll
knows
tell you,
this.
sorry, Joe. Yeah, you're gonna know if Steve is even trying that move. You're gonna know because he's gonna start clearing cap space, and maybe, perhaps, putting Justin Hall on waivers has more to do with clearing cap space than it does finding a spot for Casper. That could be the case as well, but he's gonna have to clear more. So if you see him clearing some other big cap space,
Well, the thing about it is if Hall doesn't get waived, I mean, if Hall doesn't get claimed, it's still you still owe his contract, so it's still on the cap list. So it just sucks because me and you have talked about this. Is like you want the financial flexibility, and I felt like last year he went hung ho. Stevie Yzerman went hung ho last year, and he signed a bunch of players, and he kind of got stuck keeping these guys. Like, think about it. You got stuck with Jeff Petrie. I like Jeff Petrie, but if you're gonna keep Jeff Petrie, why are you signing Justin Hall? They're two they're two cones, traffic cones. So what am I gonna do with those guys? It kept Simon Edvinsson in Grand Rapids for longer, and then when you brought him up, you started to kind of struggle, and Edvinsson was still finding his legs. And I can tell you this right now. This is one of my big things, Cindy. They had Edvinsson earlier in the season in January. They make the playoffs. That's my opinion. Enough of this defenseman roulette. Let's get the young kid in. Let's get him going. Johansson, let's get him going. I like the kind of defensive pairings they have right now that, I kind of projected, because that's the way it should be. Like, let's stop playing games. And, Justin Hall was a stupid contract. Let's put it that way. Ville Husso should never have got his contract. That was stupid. And if you're gonna sign Justin Hall, why the hell are you trading for Jeff Petrie? I mean, I know his dad is a Tigers legend, but at the same time, those are two of the same players. They're pylons.
so I think Steve is overpaid on some of these contracts also. I think in certain cases the reason he did is because he had so few options on certain things. And I think also there were some he was looking as moving pieces that he hasn't moved yet. I don't know if he's going to, but I agree with you. We need an elite goaltender. Go find one. And I agree with you. We've got a couple of them in waiting. Okay. But that doesn't help us this year. I think he needs to make a move for one this year if it's at all possible, because I think any other holes he's got anywhere else on the roster, uh, be it, we're lacking a defenseman here, or we don't have a fourth line winger over here, or whatever the case is, I think that cures a lot of ills. Because, and I said it for the last 2 years, it doesn't matter if you're scoring 5, 6 goals a game if you're letting in 6 or 7. It doesn't matter. So you've got to have somebody who can stop the puck. And
Yep.
right now, you got nobody reliable, nobody consistently stopping the puck.
Yeah, NHL.com, they did 3 things that are the most, worrying things about each NHL team, and with the Red Wings, they had one that was very, very it kinda goes into what we've been talking about, is the goaltendings. So they put here, and this is on NHL.com, they go, "The Red Wings are opening training camp with these 3 goalies, Cam Talbot, Ville Husso, and Alex Lyon." Connor Geilander was there too, and Kosa. It remains to be seen whether they keep the 3 who will emerge as starter and whether the goaltending can help Detroit reduce its goals against, which is 24th in the NHL last season, 3.3 goals per game. Talbot, who signed a 2-year, $5 million contract July 1st, went 27, 20, and 6 with 2.50 goals against average and a 9.13 save percentage, and 3 shutouts in 54 games, 52 starts. For the Kings last season, can the 37-year-old, he's 37 years old, there you go, play at a high level for the Red Wings? Can Husso, who was limited to 19 games and 18 starts by injury last season, stay healthy? And can Lyon, who was hot in January and February before cooling off down the stretch, season that and sustain it? And my thing about it is, if you look at that whole kind of synopsis from NHL.com, you got a guy that's injured all the time, you got an older goaltender, and you got Alex Lyon. And this sets up as a very, very tumultuous situation right here, because what happens when you get old? Stuff breaks down a little bit more. Just the reality. Not a dig at anybody in particular, but that's the way it goes. I know for
That
a
was
fact.
stop
I
it,
know.
Joe. That was a dig at me. I know it was. It's okay. It's cool. I've come to terms with it.
No, no,
and you're
no, no,
and
no,
you're
no.
right. You're right, by the way. It does, man. Stuff's not as easy as it was 10 years ago. I promise you that.
Well, I know when I just turned 30, I got like aches and pains that I've never had before. I'm like, wait, what the hell is going on? Like, and then Jenna, because she's younger, she's like, ha ha, you're old, ha ha. I'm like, it's not a fun time. So
Yeah,
like
well,
it's like when you're 37 and you're an NHL hockey player, like, all respect to you, but at the same time, like, we know what happens. Like, it's hockey is a brutal game. It's a very tough game on your body. And
yeah.
a 37-year-old, like, can he stay healthy? I hope so. Husso has not shown the ability to stay healthy, and one of the reasons Alex Lyon cooled off last year was simply because he played too many games. That was the issue. No longer were you going to see, teams, goalies play 80, 70 games in a season like you see in the back in the day. Like Martin Brodeur starting 81 games is unbelievable. I think he did it in 1999 or something like that. Yeah, 1999 or something like that. But that's not going to happen again. Like, I think the last of a dying breed was Henrik Lundqvist, who started, what, 73?
Yeah, they're not conditioned like that anymore. They're just not. They're not built that way anymore for one reason or another. And I'll tell you, you're exactly right. They're burning out these goalies because they're overplaying them. And who makes that decision, Joe? That's a coaching decision.
Yep.
And that's who you have to hold responsible for that. They can't keep doing that. They don't have, and then you got one guy gets hurt, you got another guy you're burning out, and then you got another guy who's just like, yeah, okay, I'm playing goalie today, okay, cool. And I'm in the lineup, yeah, hand me my what is that called,
And
stick,
if you
yeah, that thing,
and if you
you
don't
know
trust the goalie to put him in, why is he on the roster?
right.
Like, that's what I felt like with James Reimer last year. I felt like the reason the reason that he was on the roster, like, play him a little bit. Like, I know he could be a little bit shaky at sometimes. He was an older goaltender as well. Play him. But they got down the stretch and they're abusing Alex Lyon. Like February, he's all playing. January, he was all playing. You get to March, you could tell Lyon was gassed, like gassed. And that was the issue. Like, you look at Florida Panthers last year, like Bobrovsky is a hell of a goaltender, one of the best in the NHL. And the reason that they did so good down the stretch was because Stolarz came in February, March, and really took command of the net, and that gave Bobrovsky a little bit of reprieve for the playoffs. And obviously, what happened in the playoffs, they went into the playoffs, and Bobrovsky turned into playoff Bob again, and that's what happened because he wasn't burned out. And that's
Well,
what
I'll
I
tell
think.
you.
A lot of these players, a lot of these, I think the management of the goalies is a huge issue with Derek Lowe.
And it's not just Derek Lalone, because I'll tell you this, the other thing that's going on in this organization now, here is something that I do know a little bit on the inside, right? And anybody else has got inside. maybe friends around the organization could back me up on this. But the way this organization works too, look at who's your goalie coach. Who's your goalie coach? They got a new goalie coach about 3 years ago, and the way that they hire these guys is it's who's friends with who knows who. They aren't necessarily hiring the best guys. And the reason I know this is because I happen to know one of the people that was up for that job that would have blown the doors off the guy that they hired. So, who is the goalie coach? Who is that supporting cast? Um, because that guy, and I'm not going to mention names, you can look it up, but the current goalie coach, he's got a lot to own too on why the hell we can't keep pucks out of the net, because he essentially is the Ben Johnson, right? He's the play caller for these goalies. He's preparing them. He
Or
is
he's a position coach. It's like, okay,
yeah, absolutely.
I'll give you a
That's my
prime
point.
I'll
Yeah.
give you a prime example. Dan Campbell, I love Dan Campbell, very good guy. And you can look at AJ Hinch as well. Two positional coaches that they made a big move at because they said, I want to get better at that position. One was Chris Fetter with AJ Hinch, pitching coach. What a great move. Second was Terrell Williams, the defensive line coach for the Detroit Lions. See, what people don't understand is that the biggest moves that you can make with a coaching staff is your positional coaches, because they do the most work with the guys. Like, a goalie coach is huge, absolutely massive. And if their goalie coach was only hired because of who he knows or he's buddies, that's an issue. That's a huge issue.
I mean, I'm not meaning to air any dirty laundry here or anything else like that, but I'm just saying that when we're talking about the failure in the coaching, Derek Lalonde owns enough, but he doesn't own all of it, for sure. He's got his positional, as you would say, it's the positional coaches. They own some of this too, and they're the ones who are preparing what you see happen on the ice. Derek Lalonde's kind of the master of all, right? So he owns some of it, but you got to look at some of these other coaches, because I think you've also got some improvements that could be made there, and you've got some serious detriments in there somewhere. And I'm not saying their goalie coach is horrible, but what I'm saying is look at the product he's putting on the ice. Look at what you see, and you have to say all of these guys can't all be mediocre, horrible, average, because you've seen the ability for them to showcase some talent. But here's what I'm looking for out of our goalie coach. Give us some consistency.
Yep.
Even if they're consistently mediocre, that's fine. We just can't have them tanking on all the key games where they're tanking on.
Well,
That's just
the way I look at it is it's a performance-based business. Okay? I don't care about who you're friends with. I don't care who you know. I don't care who you talk to, who's your best friend, who you went to school with. Don't care. It's a performance-based business. So when I look at Alex Westland, who is the goalie coach for the Detroit Red Wings, it's a performance-based business. You got to get more out of what you're getting out of the goaltender position. And if that means making a change at the goalie coach position, that's got to be done. And if Derek Lalonde wants to die on the sword of not, firing his buddies, well, that really sends a very harsh message to me, because we've seen that before with Detroit teams, like the Detroit Lions in particular, where Matt Patricia hired all his buddies, the boob, and they never won anything because
right.
when you're as well as I do, you can hire people that that you think are capable of the job. Like, you're not going to hire someone that you go, man, I'm just hiring this guy because I know him and he's a very nice guy. Very rarely does it happen, especially in a position where you are trying to get the best out of people, right? In this position, where the goalie coach, it has to go to the best person, period. And if it doesn't, that's on the coaching staff. That's on the head coach. And I don't like that at all. And that's something that Derek Lalonde has really. There's some things about Derek Lalonde that I love, and there's some things I just don't like. And that's one of the things I don't like is this whole buddy kind of thing.
Well, they're going to have to make some changes for sure. If this if they don't show something out the gate and stay consistent, and I'll tell you, when I say show me something out of the gate, Joe, I'm not saying they got to light the world on fire, but what I'm saying is I want to see some consistency and some stability, because those are the two things they've been lacking, because you can get better as the season progresses, right? You can see that progress, and that's great. And Darren McCarty and I talk about this pretty regularly about progress. You just want to see progress, and that's great, but you got to build on a solid foundation. And the thing is, when you start out and things are already going haywire, up and down, while you're having some great games where you're just lighting the world on fire, and then you're just, tanking, that's what I don't want to see. I want to see them bringing stable, consistent play. Even if it's consistently, like I said, mediocre, you can help that throughout the season. You can elevate that throughout the season. But when you got that wild ride from the start, man, it's hard. It's like getting control over a wild horse, right? I mean, you try controlling a wild horse, man, it's tough. And so that's what I want to see beginning of the season here, Joe. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing here starting off October 10th. By the way, I gotta if you don't have anything else, I got to on this specifically. If you do, that's cool. But hey, I got to ask your opinion on this. Totally not player related, but kinda. You gotta love the way they're marketing this October 10th opening day with the whole Ferris Bueller thing, with Darren McCarty as Ferris and Danny DeKaiser as oh gosh, as Cameron at the DIA. Did you see those commercials? Are those not awesome? I thought that was kudos to whoever in the marketing department for the Detroit Red Wings came up with that. That is freaking brilliant. I thought it was hilarious. I loved it.
The marketing department has been pretty good for the Detroit Red Wings. I'm not gonna lie; they've been really on their game. And if we're gonna talk about it like you know, marketing, they get an A+ from me. Like their performance has been really, really good, and I think it's funny as hell what they did. At first I was like, and then I got it. I get it. Like it was funny.
Well,
Like
because
I
you're
really
too young to get it, Joe. It's okay. But for people in my generation, it resonates with us. Okay. That was like one of the best. He was like, Ferris Bueller was the rebel of rebels, smart ass, but man, just clever as hell. I
well.
loved it. And that is
I
a
mean,
beloved character of my childhood, should say my teenage years. And I loved it.
you know why I like it? I'll tell you why I like it. I think who's buying season tickets? Who's buying tickets?
That's right. You got it.
You know what I'm saying? Like who is buying
Yep.
tickets? You gotta play to your target market. I know what that's all about. So it's gonna be an interesting start to the season though, because when you look at the schedule, I mean they start with Pittsburgh and Nashville, which Nashville looks very, very improved. They go to New York, and then we'll probably I'm off that week, the 13th through the 19th, so we can do it Tuesday and early in the day or Wednesday, or whatever, before the New York game at home. It's interesting. They have three.
Slacker.
uh, They have
I'm just
four.
teasing
They
you.
have to start the season. They have 3 Thursday home games. They got 2 Saturday away games, and they got a Sunday back. They got a Buffalo Edmonton back to back. That's a tough. This schedule really, just if we're gonna be totally honest, like I know we're kind of joshing at that, but this schedule to start out with is tough. Nashville's gonna be tough. New York is gonna be tough. You got Nashville twice, New York twice, the Islanders, the Devils, Edmonton, who was in the Cup final, Buffalo, Winnipeg. Like those are two good teams. And then you look at it like you look at it going into in November, like you got Buffalo again, and then it kind of cools down, but then you get Toronto and New York to back in a back to back on the November 8th and 9th. And then you got a away you go on a road trip where you go to Pittsburgh, Anaheim, LA. You come back in November. You come back in November the 21st, and you play the Islanders, Boston. You go to New York again for the Islanders, and then the pre-Thanksgiving game, you got the Calgary Flames, which they're going through a rebuild. So this is going to tell us all you want to know about this Red Wings team. Like if they're good, you'll figure out real quickly if they're good or not. And I do
Dude, and
think that
that's why I love that schedule. I love that schedule.
and I'll tell you what right off the hop. I think if this doesn't go well going into Thanksgiving break, you could potentially see a coaching change. That's my opinion.
I know everybody wants that, and I know we've talked about it before. I just don't see Steve doing it. I really
If you
don't. I think he'll wait
if
it out.
you first of all, I don't really criticize Eisman because I know what he came into, but I will criticize Eisman if he doesn't decide to make this move. If if we're at Thanksgiving and this team is woefully performing, you have to let him go. You have to. There's no way you keep him aboard. You got Bob Bugner, you got Alex Tanguay on the staff. You can make them your interim head coach. We've seen how interim head coaches can work. They can help you out. We've seen that with the Edmonton Oilers. We've seen that with the Blues when they went on their Stanley Cup championship run with Berube. Like, look, I love Derek Lalonde, but if he can't get it done, you have to move on. Period. Of the story. This cannot. If you're going into Thanksgiving, you're out of a playoff spot. There hasn't been major injuries. Something has to change. Like something has to change. This has been 2 years now that Lalonde's been here, and there's been 2 straight years that he's woefully performed in 2 months. So this is the 2 months that I kind of look at him and go, all right, it's time to make some headway. And there's no excuses. And if they want to make excuses, well, then Eisman could wear that letter too.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't think he's going to do it. And the reason I don't think Steve will do that is because he hasn't done it. Have you ever seen where Steve has made that? He stuck with Blashill, gonna stick with Newsy. Did you see him in? I don't. And I'll honestly, would have to go back and look. When he was GM of the Tampa Bay Lightning, did he make a midseason head coaching change? I don't think so, but maybe he didn't need to. But
Well, yeah, John Cooper, but I don't know if
I
I don't know if he changed coaches with Guy Boucher.
I don't think he'll do it midseason.
Mm. It's
I
going to
just
be
don't see him doing it, Joe. I don't disagree with you, but I don't see him doing it.
If he doesn't do it, then then he might as well put himself on the line then too, because it just can't happen. Like Derek Lalonde cannot be, this end all be all. Like I hate to say it, but that's the way it goes. Like you can't if he underperforms going into Thanksgiving. That's that's not my issue. That's not your issue. That's the Red Wings issue. And you know what? We talk about it all the time, Cindy. There's veterans on this roster. They are going to be pissed off if you don't make a coaching change. Like they understand it. Like if they're not going to sit here and go, well, we're not going to waste the season. Like, please just trade me. That's what's going to happen.
Well, and that might be a situation. I'm not saying that wouldn't be the situation where Steve is put in a position where it's him or it's me. You know what I mean? Now, historically, you know what situations usually cause that, and let's hope that it doesn't happen here. But historically, when you get caught, maybe with the with the GM's wife or the owner's wife or another player's wife, that guy's gonna come to you and say it's me or it's him. You know what I mean?
Well, that's like a
So
Mel
let's
Tucker
hope that's
situation. Miguel Cabrera,
Oh gosh,
Vasil Garcia.
Brendan Shanahan. I mean, there's been so
Mm.
many of them. It happened on the Red Wings 2 years ago. I've been told stories, um, but outside of that, yeah, you might have a guy who says, "Hey, look, my legacy is on the line here. I came here hoping for a legitimate shot. You told me we would have a legitimate shot at making the postseason where I can preserve my legacy a little bit, not necessarily looking for another Stanley Cup, but hey, it's got to be respectable. And you're not giving me the tools to be respectable here. I could see maybe one of those guys making that argument to Steve Yzerman, and now he's got to be like, all right, well, now I'm in a spot. What am I going to do? I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but I just don't see him outside of something like that happening, like a tear or one of his other guys, him or me. Outside of that scenario, I just don't see connection. Let's hope we don't have that. Hope that
You're breaking
we
up a
see
little bit.
strong, steady, and consistent play. I was
You were
good. Let's
breaking up.
hope we don't have this situation. Let's hope.
Yeah, you were breaking up a little
Oh,
bit, but
sorry,
I heard
Joe.
I heard I heard what you
But
were
you heard
saying. I
me.
just wanted, yeah, I just wanted to let the people know that you were breaking up a little bit because you're on the phone, and that's all right. It's cool. But yeah, they gotta get it fixed out. And my whole thing about it is, look, if you're in a situation where they're not doing good, changes got to be made. That's the way it goes. And as sad as it is to say it, that's the way it goes. So that has to happen. So there's just a couple of comments, and then we're gonna have the closing kind of thing. We're gonna talk about if they're gonna make the playoffs or not gonna make the playoffs. Uh, Dil, uh, uh, Dylan Frody says, would love to see Johansson and Casper on the roster. I agree. I put him on my roster. Mark says, what goalie is out there to trade for? We're kind of stuck with Husso, Lyon, and Talbot, at least for the season. Kind of looking like it, but if you want to get into Jeremy Swayman situation, you can do that as well. Me and Cindy talked about that earlier in the podcast. You can go back and listen to it. But here's the deal, Cindy. We are down to playoffs or no playoffs. So I'm gonna get your answer first, and then I'll go on mine.
Gosh, you know what? We were wrong last year when we said playoffs. You know what though? The thing of it is, I want to say yes because of the talent we've added.
Yep.
But but the goaltender situation has me worried. And to be honest with you, you pointed it out earlier in the show, Joe, the division is so tough. That has me worried. I'm a f- I would love to say yes, and I'd like the opportunity, just before I say this, I would like the opportunity to revisit this at the Thanksgiving break, and I will stand by that one. But right now, I'm going to say we barely miss it again. I think we're going to miss it. I say no playoffs.
Yeah, that's the issue right there. Is I want to say that the expectation should be playoffs, but when you look at this team and you look at the division and you go, okay, what about the goaltending? Like, obviously, I think Detroit's weak link is the goaltending position. How do they stack up with the other teams in the East? Like, how do they stack up with those guys? Like, I don't think they have a better goaltending situation than the Islanders, not by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think they have a better goaltending situation than like the Lightning or the Florida Panthers or the Bruins, which we don't know how the Jeremy Swayman thing is going to play out. So that could play a key factor in this. But I mean, look, I think the expectation should be the playoffs because I'm not going to let um, I'm not gonna let the Derek Malone and Eiserman get off the you know that they don't have expectations. So I gotta say playoffs because personally, my opinion is if you don't get the playoffs, then Malone should be gone. That's my opinion because it's been 3 years that this guy has been here. He hasn't really got this team to a better level. If they miss the playoffs by a couple points like they did last year, I really don't care. He has to be gone because you're wasting time with Larkin. You're wasting time with Patrick Kane. You're wasting time with Berggren. I mean, not Berggren, DeBrincat. You're wasting time with Sider and Edmondson, Raymond as young players. I mean, this is just fugazi. So no, I'm not gonna say there should be no playoff. I'm not gonna make this expectation that there's no playoffs. I think that if you are a good coach, if you think that you put together a good roster, then you're gonna make the playoffs. And if you don't, there's got to be changes made. Like it doesn't matter where it comes from. Like I know that Eiserman's not going anywhere. We know that. So who's going to be
Now,
gone?
Detroit royalty, he'll be there forever.
Unless he keeps this train going like that. It cannot be the same thing it was last year. Period. End of story. I don't want to sit here and say that, you know, oh, I want it to be, I want to put this expectation out there that they're not going to make the playoffs. Like, okay, I can foresee them not making the playoffs, partly because I don't believe in the coaching staff, partly because I don't believe in the goaltending. But if something's going to fire this organization up, it's got to be being a failure again, and that's not the right way to look at it. But I mean, look at what the Tigers had to do. Look at what the you don't have a good coach. I don't believe Derek Lalonde's a good coach. So if Steve Eisman wants to keep Lalonde around, like that's where he's gonna end up, where it's gonna be his job on the line, because
Well, I'll
you
tell
can't
you.
you can't keep a guy around for so long. Like after a while, like there was an expiration date on Mike Babcock. There was an expiration date on there's always an expiration date on these coaches. Like you don't stay around forever. It just doesn't happen. Those are the greats, and the greats usually leave on their own terms. And Derek Lalonde's not a great head coach.
Well, here's the thing too, is you got a guy who has carried the water for this team in almost every capacity: leadership, performance, mentorship. And that's Dylan Larkin. And there has been a huge weight on his shoulders because he's basically the head coach, the conditioning coaches, the positional coach, the player on the ice. I mean, this guy has satisfied almost every one of those. He's had to really spread himself thin and served in many capacities, plus all the stuff you see off the ice that the guy does, all the team building stuff, all the community stuff. I mean, the guy is everywhere all the time. I see him a lot. And um, I've watched him for a long time, and I know him a little bit. So this guy has been under tremendous amount of pressure and weight to really carry this team. No human can continue that year after year, season after season, and not see significant progress. So, at the risk of potentially burning out Dylan Larkin, also, he's got to get this guy some help. Patrick Kane helps a little bit, DeBrincat helps a little bit, but they still need a leader. They still need a captain. Still need someone steering the ship. And I'm not so sure that they've got the coaching staff that they need for the caliber talent that they brought on. You got to have someone who knows how to put these pieces together. I'm not so sure about that. And then again, the goaltending situation. Now that is on Steve Eiserman. Steve's got to fix that. Okay,
Well, we
that's
we
got to
talked
get
about.
fixed.
I'm cutting you off for a minute because I
That's all right.
people are. I didn't know this. You and me didn't know this because I never got the notification from NHL.com or any of the Twitters. To be honest, Jeremy Swayman signed a contract today, so that happened like
Shit.
5 hours ago.
Well,
So it's
bummer.
kind of like this is a fluid situation. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't see it, but yeah, it came out like I was in the middle of prep and it came out around 9:20. So
Hey, but
whatever.
that doesn't mean that a trade can't happen, right? I mean, there's still opportunity for a trade to happen mid-season. Um,
Well, they're not
and
going to trade
either
Jeremy
they,
Swayman now, but that it
well, no, but
could there be another opportunity available because of
right.
this potentially? Like, is there a guy that could come available that like we're not thinking of right now because it's early in the season, but could they be available late in the season? And are the Detroit Red Wings in position to do that? Yeah, thank you to Mark and Dalen in the comments because they said it and I didn't see it on the app when I pulled in, so that's not bad on my part. But I was doing prep for the podcast, so I was kind of putting together my projection lineups and everything. But yeah, that happened just 6 hours ago. So again, fluid situation, but they got to get this goaltender situation. I'm not big.
Yeah,
I'm not big on this goaltender situation.
well, that's the thing. Regardless of what happened with Swayman, okay, so he's off the table now. He's not an option. But that we still have that problem. We still have the problem of three goalies who are not consistent, three goalies who are not uh haven't demonstrated that they can perform consistently. We don't have proper management of those goalies. It's kind of like Dan Campbell, right? They talk about he had clock management problems, right, as a head coach when he first started. All right, well, the coaching staff for the Detroit Red Wings has goalie management problems. They
Yep,
overplayed Alex Lyon last year. They
which led to
didn't
his
play
demise.
right. I mean, you know what I mean? So you got a problem there. And I think you got to look at your goalie coach. You got to look at your head coach. You got to look at the coaching situation. They haven't been handed the best hand, true, but I don't think that they have made the most out of what they've got, even if it's not much. They've got to get some consistency there, and they've got to take some pressure off of their forwards to have to score 6 and 7 goals because they got a guy letting in 5 or 6. You got to do that. Steve's got to remedy that situation I don't know how he's going to do it, to be honest, because I really don't know the inside of who's available, what the options are. But he's got to fix that situation, and maybe it's not a matter of the guys that are on the ice. It's a matter of fixing the guys that are behind the guys on the ice.
It's going to be an interesting situation, no matter how to slice it. Like, Cindy doesn't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think the expectation should be they make the playoffs. We're going to see coming up Thursday against Pittsburgh, and then Saturday against Nashville. We're going to see really quick how good this team is. And this schedule in October and November, like we went through it. It's a tough schedule. So they got to get this going, and they got to get going quick. And if they don't get it going, it's going to be a big issue for this team. And if Cindy is right and they don't make the changes necessary, then we're kind of in limbo land, to be honest. So it's going to be very interesting, and we're going to obviously break it down on the Red Alert podcast all season long, because we have a lot of stuff. We have a lot of stuff that we're going to come out with. So just stay tuned to the podcast. And Cindy, it's been a really good podcast. I think everyone's going to be enjoying it. If they're going to be listening to the Jeremy Swayman, we didn't see the notification, so that's the way it goes.
Well, you know what? But it wasn't an invaluable conversation, because the point is that you've got to. It still begs the question: are they trying to open up some spots? If so, what are they opening them up for? And are they going to put the right pieces in those spots where they're making? I think it makes me hopeful. I'm an eternal optimist, Joe, and I am hopeful that some of the things we've seen happen so far are indicators that Steve has taken the potential changes here seriously, and that he is looking to be proactive, and he is looking to do things quickly when he needs to. Maybe that's the case, but would love to see Casper in the lineup. Hopefully that's going to happen. I am going to forever be hopeful, and hopeful too, and I will double down on what you said. We will keep everybody updated, and if you want to hear it first, you'll hear it here first. So make sure to check in with us. I gave you those 3 examples. There's going to be more of them. This is where you need to be for all your Detroit Red Wings news.
Yeah,
like, subscribe, follow,
and rate and review on the podcast as you're listening to the podcast. And look, this is such a fluid situation. There's more people getting put on waivers as we talk, like not Detroit, but other teams, and it's going to be a totally fluid situation. I mean, you see Jeremy Swayman get signed to a contract. There could be multiple roster moves made in the next few days. So stay tuned to the Red Alert Podcast Facebook page, Instagram, my Twitter, and then my TikTok, and we'll keep it there for you guys, obviously. But there's going to be a lot of stuff happening it's going to be mayhem. I was lucky the Lions were off on a bye week last week, because I got to do a lot of Red Wings prep, so that was really good for me. But I know Cindy's busy schedule with what's coming down in November. There's gonna be the times where I might be doing the podcast alone, because she's busy doing her thing. But we will see you on the next.
So it's all good.
We will see you guys on the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey on the Red Alert Podcast. Stay tuned to the Red Alert Podcast page on Facebook and Instagram, like I said, and we'll keep you up to date on everything Red Wings and beyond. So thank you for that, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey. We'll probably do it next week, so that people will get 2 games under our belt, maybe 3 games under our belt, and then we'll talk about the Red Wings 3-game stretch. But thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next podcast. Have a good one.